everyone, welcome to day 2 of the Napoli Sew Along. Today we're going to be cutting out our pattern pieces from the fabric. So I've got all my pieces cut. Before I start cutting, I want to, I touched earlier on the video I linked yesterday to always make sure to check your 1-inch square. So after I finished the video, making the video yesterday, I went ahead and measured my square, and the square makes sure that your pattern piece is printed properly. Well, my square was 1/16 of an inch too small. So if I'd been in a hurry, I could have been like, it's okay. Well, I investigated a little further, and it was small. So you know the border, the 4 sides that your pattern piece prints on? Here, I've actually got part of one. Pretend this bottom part's here. I cut it off at the top of the sleeve. But if for some reason you think your 1-inch square is measuring a teeny tiny bit small, measure this large rectangle, because it should be 7 inches wide and 10 inches tall. So when I measured mine earlier, it was only 6 3/4 inches wide and about 9 3/8 inches tall. So it was too small. So anyways, I'm thinking it had to do with the latest Adobe update. I've asked other people, theirs are still printing fine even though they're Adobe updated. Some reason I got unlucky and mine is printing too small, so I had to increase my percentage in order to get my pattern to print the proper way. To give you an idea of how much it would have affected the skirt, I put my old skirt piece on top of my new skirt piece, and it would have been 3/4 of an inch short. So pretty significant on a size 7 skirt, in my opinion. So anyways, we are going to get started cutting. I have chosen this floral plaid, and I figured it would be a perfect opportunity to show you how I measure, or how I match up plaid across the seam. I don't know that I'll be able to match the floral with it, but I might get lucky. I have like 3 yards of fabric here to work with, so maybe I'll get lucky and also do that. But I always overlap the wearer's right over the left for girls. So when I'm looking at my pattern piece, it's going to be the pattern piece as is, face up, basically the left side of the bodice, but it's going to be, when Aurora's wearing it, it's going to be her right side. So I am going to, you can see, I marked the seam allowance, I marked the middle of the placket. You always want to read through your patterns when you're matching, but this placket overlaps 1 inch. So I marked the center of that, and then I marked where this would be where the other side comes to when it's underneath the placket. So when I'm matching it up, it's actually going, my other side is actually going to extend a 1/2 inch past this because it hasn't had the seam allowance taken yet. So on the skirt, the skirt piece is a little bit different. You fold this, you fold the initial center line under 1/4 of an inch, and then you fold it under an additional inch, so that creates your inch placket. So I've marked my inch so far, and I started marking the other ones. I've got to continue marking it all the way up. That just helps know where it needs to overlap. So I'm going to cut out the left side, and then what I always do is I go ahead and go up to my iron and fold the seam allowance under. So then it's real easy for me to match up exactly where on the print it is going to be. So let's get started. I'm going to switch my camera around real quick. Okay, so here we are. Got my pattern piece. Got a couple pattern weights, aka things I've found laying around. And what I am wanting to do is I'm going to match the middle of this plaid up on my placket, so at the center of my placket. So this will be where my buttons go. And then I'm going to have this be my bottom line of my bodice. The reason why I don't choose this right here is you got to be real careful with seam allowances, especially like this white will be real noticeable if you don't sew it 100% accurate. So, but it also, actually I might drop it down just to half of it. You also want to make it easy to know where you're matching up all your pieces when you're cutting. So I'm going to just cover that black line. Use my pattern weights. Move this a little bit. Now this is one of those fabrics that can shift very easily depending on how you look at it. But the drape on it is fantastic, so sometimes it's worth the annoyance of cutting it. And normally I'm at my ironing board cutting, but I really don't have a big enough area to get the skirt, so I'm down on my kitchen table right now. And because this is a lighter weight, kind of flowy woven, I'm going to line it in regular black quilter's cotton. So that way it gives my bodice just a touch of stability. Okay, so now I'll show you what we have. Here is the bodice that will be on the right. And I'm going to go turn this under a 1/2 inch on my iron, so that way I can see exactly where it's going to overlap onto the other half of the bodice, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have ironed my seam allowance on the left side of the bodice, which is Aurora's right, when she's wearing it, and I've actually found a match pretty easily. And I don't know if you can see this, but I have the original bodice piece that I cut out lying on top of the fabric, so I know where to match it. If you look closely, you might be able to find it. If not, I'm going to point it out to you here in a second. Since I have to flip my pattern piece over to cut it out, I have got my line of where the overlap ends. So this line right here is what I'm going to slip under. This portion is what I'm going to slip under my original bodice piece. And then once I've got it lined up, I'm going to put weights on top of this side, and then I can pull my original pattern, my original bodice piece off of my fabric, so that way when I cut this part, I don't obviously cut my other bodice. So I'm going to lift right here. You see it? Alright, so I'm going to carefully position this. This is much easier on a regular woven because if I even tug on this slightly, the whole fabric shifts. Just want to double check that I've got it right along that line. Okay, set my weights down. All right. Now I'm going to pick this up and I can cut it out. Sometimes when you have a fabric that has a toss for the print, sometimes it's just random, so you can't really match it up, but I try to match up across the button placket or side seams whenever I can, especially if it's on the front, because to me it's super noticeable if it doesn't match across the placket. But I'm also a perfectionist when it comes to things. So what some other people might not notice, I tend to obsess over. All right. Done. And then when we cut out the back, you'll just line up the bottom of the back piece with the line on your fabric. So for me, it will be right along that black line. You know, it'll depend on your fabric if you're trying to match it up, but all right, so here we've got this, and then right now it'll be over by 1.5 inches because the bottom piece does not have the seam allowance taken off of it. Oh, okay, see what I was doing. All right, so that was matching it up, and then my button will go right along here. So now we can move on to the back and get that cut, and I will get my lining pieces cut, and then I will do the same process of matching along the skirt seam. So I'll be back for that. Okay, I want to give you a quick tip when you are cutting out your back bodice, especially on plaid. Sometimes it's really hard when you have to cut something on the fold to make sure that it is folded so the plaid is going straight. So what I do is I cut out my lining so then it's not on the fold, and I actually don't even need any weights then because I can just lay my fabric down and it just stays in place. So what I've done is lined it up over this little black line that I had my front bodice pieces lined up at, so that way actually the front and back won't match at all, but just for my own matching, I guess. So if you put this, I decided I wanted halfway through the plaid to be the center. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. This is one of the rare bodices that the skirt also has part of the armhole in it. So this will actually not join the front piece along any seam. But just personal preference, I guess. So it's all similar. Now when I cut this back of the skirt, obviously it's going to be wider than the bodice, so the print is not going to match up per se across the waist seam or the bodice seam, but I'll still put the center of my skirt exactly where I centered my bodice, so at least it'll give a little bit of continuity. Just the little details that can make a little bit of difference in the finished product. Stripes and plaid are my favorite to sew, and I know most people try to avoid them because it is tedious matching, but I've actually, alright, so I gotta fix that. That part was hiding. I would say this fabric is similar to rayon in a way, but I think it's more a polyester blend. Okay, so now I've got my back, my fronts, and I've also got my front lining. So now I'm going to cut out the skirt. Okay, so now I've got my skirt, and I'm going to apologize because it's going to be kind of hard to see, but I'm going to start with the wearer's right piece again. So I've got my arm on that side. It's the bottom of the arm, see? I've marked where the middle of my placket is, at the top and the bottom, so I can line that up. I've also marked where the hem is. If you're doing the dress version, it's a 2-inch hem. You fold it up 1 inch and then fold it up a 2nd inch. So I've got that marked, and now I am ready to cut. After I cut this, I'll take it up to my iron, and I'm going to go ahead and iron my button placket. in place so that way I know exactly. Alright, here we go. One last little bit. So I've got it cut out. Now I'm going to take the pattern piece off. I'm going to take it up to my iron and I'm going to go ahead and iron in that placket so that way I can match it for the other side. Okay, so I'm back with my skirt piece and now I'm going to cut out my second front and then we'll have to cut out the back and then I've got one more sleeve to cut out. So I am going to match the plaid and the floral across the placket again, and I've actually got it laying down. This is where the edge of the placket's going to be. So what I did is mark on the backs of my pattern piece where this is where the front bodice placket, folded placket, will rest, because this gets folded under a quarter and then 1 inch. So this part right here will be overlapped. So I'm going to try to lay it on top this time. Instead of shimmying it under. This fabric is already shifting a ton, so it's kind of irritating. Definitely not the easiest fabric to try to match up across anything, but the end result will be worth it. So I'm going to original skirt away so I don't accidentally cut it. And of course it's only caught the bottom portion of it, so let me try to tilt this. There we go. Alright. Now I'm just going to make sure that all of the plaid is even around the edges. Like I said, this fabric shifts a ton, but I'd like it to match up as much as possible. I've also got my hem marked, so you can see this part shifted. Alright, hopefully this is matching. I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. And I'm going to go get my fabric scissors that I left upstairs. So, hang on one second. Okay. Because this fabric shifts a lot, I am trying to stay with the plaid printed on it as well. So like over here, I would deviate it just a little bit because I was staying with the plaid. Because I know this fabric shifts, so it probably got stretched a little weird underneath. This type of fabric does not do well in a circle skirt because the weight of it and the bias stretch is too much and you just can't get an even hem. At least I have never been able to. Again, I'm just going to stay with the plaid. So if I take this up and iron the placket on, it should overlap perfectly and match. So I'm going to go double check that. Okay, so I have got my plackets ironed. Now, if you're just doing a regular skirt and you're not trying to match up across the plaid or stripes or anything, don't worry about, well, I guess stripes you really don't need to iron the placket. If you're doing plaid, I like to double check that I have matched it properly. Here's where it matches. And obviously it's not sewn yet or anything, but I am happy with it. So I'm going to cut out my back piece. I have one more sleeve to cut out, and then today's task will be completed. And then tomorrow we will start sewing. We're going to create the bodice part, and we will also prepare the sleeves, which includes a French seam. So if you've never done a French seam before, they're extremely easy. We're going to do that tomorrow, and the reason we're doing a French seam on the sleeve is because in the pattern it has where you can roll up the sleeves if you'd like at the end. So that way you don't have a serged seam showing. When you roll that up, it'll have a nice pretty French seam, and then it can be worn up or down. So again, today's task is to cut out your pattern pieces. If you're matching plaid, I hope this helped. Or even if you're matching any sort of print across the placket. It takes a little bit of work prior to cutting, but the finished result is a flawless skirt, so it doesn't, all you're going to see are buttons down the front. You're not even going to see that there's an opening. So anyways, hope this helped. I'm having fun sewing along with you guys, and can't wait to see your progress. Bye.